If you're running FSLogix on a Azure Files Provisioned V1 file share, which most of you probably are, there's a good chance you pay more than you need to and still getting slower logons, profile issues, and unstable AVD session hosts. Microsoft have quietly introduced Azure Files Provisioned V2 storage, and honestly, it's a huge upgrade. With Azure Files V2 Provisioned storage, you get way more IOPS, way more throughput, automatic bursting during heavy logon storms, and you finally start paying for terabytes of storage that you don't need. This really matters for ridiculously sensitive to storage performance. Every logon, every Tcache write, every Outlook index update, it all hits your file share. If your backend can't keep up, then you get slow logons, profile lockups, corruption, and host instability. Azure Files Provisioned V2 storage massively reduces that pain. You get faster, smoother experiences, fewer profile issues, and far more stable AVD session hosts, while optimizing the cost instead of inflating it. In this video, I'm going to break down exactly what's changed, why V2 fixes so many of the bottlenecks in V1, and then we'll deploy your V2 file share together, test it with real users, and you can see the difference yourself. So we'll look at the cost comparisons. If you enjoy deep dive AVD, Windows 365, Intune, and nerdy content, please hit the like and subscribe button because I'll drop new videos like this every single week. So let's talk about what's actually changed with Azure Files Premium when Microsoft introduced Provisioned V2 storage and why it makes such a huge difference for FSLogix. With the old Provisioned V1 model, performance was tied directly to capacity. If you needed more IOPS or more throughput, you had to buy more storage, even when you didn't need this space. So a lot of environments ended up massively over-provisioning on terabytes just to get decent FSLogix performance, and if they didn't, they saw slow logons, profile delays, Outlook and Teams issues, and unstable AVD session hosts. So Provisioned V2 completely changes that model. Instead of forcing performance and capacity to scale together, V2 separates it. So you only provision the storage you actually need and then choose the performance separately. You get a free baseline of IOPS and throughput before you pay for anything extra. So if you stop wasting money on storage you're not using, instead pay only for the performance that FSLogix really needs. V2 also includes bursting, which is a huge thing for AVD. So during heavy activity like morning logon storms, Azure automatically boosts your IOPS and throughput above the baseline to absorb the spike. So this means smoother logons, fewer timeouts, and far less profile contention, even when hundreds of users hit the system at once. Another big improvement is the flexible performance scaling. Provisioned V2 goes all the way up to 50,000 IOPS, 5 gigabits per second throughput, and 256 terabytes per file share. You've got full control. So if your FSLogix environment needs more headroom, you can dial it up. If you overshoot, you can dial it back down again. And Azure handles a short burst automatically for you. So while V2 is all about performance, it also gives you much more predictable costs. There's no transaction fees at all. You pay for a simple fixed monthly rate based on what you provision, which means no surprise bills, even when the user activity jumps up. So Microsoft say many workloads are actually saving between 30 and 50% because of the lower storage pricing and the removal of those transaction charges. So here's the bottom line. V1 forces you to buy capacity for performance. V2 lets you buy performance for performance. And for FSLogix, that translates into faster logons, smoother profiles, fewer corruptions, and far more stable AVD session hosts, all without overspending on the storage. What we'll do now is go into the portal, explore the settings, and then I'll show you some testing that I've been doing so you can see what differences. We'll head over into the Azure portal, create a new file share, and show you the differences. Here you can see within the Azure portal, I've got my different file shares. We're going to create a test one, create a new storage account. I select my resource group, so I'm going to select that as Nerdio. Storage account name. So this obviously has to be individual. It can't already exist, which I don't think it does. We go to UK South, that's our region, and select storage type. So I'm going to select the Azure Files, and then we select Premium, right? So when doing FSLogix, we always want Premium. Now here's where the difference is. So you can see here, I've got file share billing. V1, provision only capacity on IOPS scale accordingly. And then V2, provision capacity on IOPS individually, right? So that's the new model that we've got here. I'm going to select Provisioned V2. Okay, so nothing exciting happens there, so we'll click next. We're just going to click standard for all these. Next. All right, so that's going to create that storage account, so we'll create that there. Okay, so that storage account has been created. Now when I go to file share, I'm going to create a new file share. I'm going to create this as FSLogix lowercase FSLogix test. Okay, now we see here we've got provisioned storage, right? So historically that's what used to match up to the IOPS and throughput, right? So the higher storage you provision, the higher your IOPS and throughput was. Now it's completely separate. And then it's basically saying you've got 4,000 IOPS and 228 megabits a second throughput. Okay. But what if I only wanted like a low number than that? So maybe I only want 500 gigs, right? So see that number's gone down. But what I can now do is I'm going to manually set that throughput, and maybe I want 10,000 IOPS and I want a much higher throughput. Okay. So I now can select that. So rather than having to provision like lots more storage, I just separate that out and I just select this here, right? And that's literally all you have to do. Once you've created that, you can then go back and edit it afterwards as well. So I'm creating provision storage with 500 gigabits. I'm creating 10,000 IOPS and I'm creating 1,750 megabits a second of throughput, right? So I click create and then that'll go ahead. Okay, so now you can see here we've got provision storage. So I can click on that and I can increase that, but I can also decrease and increase these, right? So maybe I've realized that, okay, I don't need 10,000 IOPS, I need 5,000 IOPS. Not a problem. I can just go into here and then adjust my IOPS and throughput accordingly. So if your workload is increasing, you can just give it more. If your workload is going down, you can just give it less, and then obviously the cost will be associated with that as well. Definitely a much better way of doing things. Historically, you'd have to go in and basically increase the storage account, so you'd pay a lot more money. But here we can be a lot more cost effective about how much it's actually going to cost you, and that's what we'll go into next. What we're going to do now is look at the price comparison, see how much money we could potentially save. That's the reason why most people do this. Not only could you get a better performance, but you could also save money as well, right? So we have a example scenario. So we have an example where we got 2,500 users, okay, estimating 10 IOPS per user, and I'm estimating its size. I'm allocated about 5 gigabits, right? So obviously this is not real life. I'm just showing you what the numbers could potentially be. That means I need 12,500 gigabits, and I also need 25,000 IOPS, right? So let's go and look and see what this would cost us in V1 versus V2. So in V1, this is from the Azure cost calculator. In UK South, provisioned, and now I've had to provision 2,200 gigabits, so 22 terabytes of storage, to give me 25,000 IOPS. Okay, so it's going to give me throughput of 2,300 megabits a second as well, right? So that's going to equate to a cost of £3,870 a month, right, for our storage, which is about right. That's generally what we see out there in the wild. So that's an old V1 model. Obviously, if you need more IOPS, let's say maybe we're adding more users or the user getting a complaint, now I have to say, okay, I want to go to 50,000 IOPS. So you see that storage has jumped up to 4,700, right? And that's jumped up to $8,000. So it's doubled the cost, okay? And just because I've had to give you more IOPS. So let's look at that scenario with the new Provisioned V2 model. So you can see here what I've done. I've got the Provisioned V2 model, and we're still in UK South. We're still using SSD Premium, but now I've got my provisioned IOPS set to 2,500, right? Because I can separate it, and that's giving me 12,500 gigabits, because that's what I need. That means my total cost is now $1,560 compared to $3,000 previously. So I've reduced my costs by 50%. Remember, I showed you that stat before where Microsoft said this could reduce your storage accounts by 50%. This is exactly what this is showing, because I've decoupled the performance from the capacity. I'm not having to over provision the capacity to give me the performance that I need. If I needed to jump up to 50,000 IOPS, I'll just go into here, 50,000 IOPS please. Thank you very much, no extra costs. Right, and yeah, definitely a huge step forward. It could save you a huge amount of money. So have a look at this, because it's a much better way of doing things, rather than having to use the capacity of the storage to equate what the performance is, which is what we've had to do traditionally for many years with storage, especially in the on-prem world, which is very similar in the Azure world as well. Okay, so now I'm going to show you what this looks like in the Azure portal and some testing that I did, just to see if I could see performance differences, I create a quick script which will actually go ahead and log on a number of users onto a session host with FSLogix performance. I'll show you that now. What I've got here is a script to launch RDP sessions, and I created some users as well. You can see here we created these users, the RDP files set to automatic log on, and then I went ahead there and basically enabled that. So you can see here you got profile test user 1 example. So these are the FSLogix profiles that you can see here. No activity, log them onto the session host and then log them off as well. If I just go onto the desktop, we should be able to see. So I've got the new and the old. So this is the old file share. Just my username in there. Okay, so this is the old file share. You can see I was working at 6:30 this morning doing this video. You can see I've got the users and the new file share as well. So that's exactly the same time, and then they logged on at 8:44 AM. Next, heading to the Azure portal, let's have a look and see what differences we see. All right, so we're here in the Azure portal. The first one is the V1. You can see here we've got our latency. So latency is how I measure performance really, because if you've got high latency, it means the storage account isn't able to keep up. Our success server latency is 1.95. Say what this is a simulated log on with 10 users logging on all at the same time. So there's 10 users hitting the storage zone trying to emulate the morning logon spike. We can see the success latency graphs as well. So you can see the more we use sort of the capacity or use the file share, and the kind of latency goes up. The average latency is like 1.95 milliseconds, which is perfectly acceptable capacity. When you go up to more than 20, that's when you start to have problems, but for 1.95 it is a very respectable figure. So that's on the V1 storage. And then if we look at the V2 storage, I've got slightly lower, I've got 1.89. Real world differences, you probably won't see that. If I wanted to, I could give that more, but I don't think with the amount of users that I'm testing with, I probably won't see much difference at all. This really only really comes into play when you've got hundreds of users hitting the storage at the same time. Then if you look at the performance tabs as well, you can see there. So that's the V2. And then if we go there into the V1, we can just see very similar looking graphs. The success latency average 8.86. Go to the performance tab, and then we got actually quite high actually. So on the V2, 18 milliseconds. Wow, okay, I'm not sure what's going on there, but yeah, they're the differences between the two. But you say you can't really see much in there as well. Then obviously we can go here, we can see capacity. So that's just showing us capacity. So there were no differences there between the old and the new. So again, if I go to capacity, we can see there that's exactly the same pretty much. So 65386, and then go to capacity, yeah, 627. So pretty much the same. The only other thing that you can look at, so if I go into metrics, so this is the V2. In fact, let's go to the metrics on the V1 first. If I go to the file, so what I've got in the V1, we've got the capacity and we've got the availability. So we've got burst credits, for example. If I go to file share provision bandwidth megabits a second, we can see that there. So it's basically saying it's provisioned like 100 and just under 140 megabits a second. But if I go onto the old file share bandwidth transaction, see, we don't see that. In fact, yeah, so it's slightly different count. It's not showing me the provisioned bandwidth capacity. So the metrics are slightly different. Just wanted to show you that. But if you wanted to look and see, okay, how much provision capacity I've actually got, you can actually go in here, go to the file, and look at file share provision and bandwidth, file share provision IOPS. If I click on that, it's showing me I've been provisioned like 3,000 IOPS, right? So that's what you separated for the storage capacity. So that's a different metric you've got there now. All right. So that's pretty much it for this video. As you can probably tell, I'm a huge fan of the new storage. It's cheaper, faster, much more controllable. Definitely recommend moving to that storage. How do you move to that storage? Probably quite simple. For my session host, all I literally did was I just flicked the register key on the AVD session host to point to the new storage. Obviously, what you'd normally do then is copy the profiles across. Right, so you can use a tool called iCackles because that copies the permissions as well. So as long as the file share permissions are in place, you could literally just take all your profiles, put them onto the new storage that you provision, and then flick over the register key to point to the new storage, and that's all you have to do. So definitely recommend moving to the new model if you can, because so much more benefits that you get from using the old storage. All right, that's it from this week's video. I hope you learned something new. If you did, please drop a comment. Also, drop a comment in the comment section. Are you going to move to this new storage? Any downsides that you can think of? All right, that's it for now. I'll see you next week. Bye bye.